Hello, my name is Amita Sehgal. I'm the Principal Lecturer at Majors Institute of Excellence, Singapore. Today's tutorial is going to be on animating a take. Now, a take is one of those actions that you will use quite frequently. Its most popular form is when a character is looking at something that surprises or shocks him and he's taken aback. So the taking aback is what you would call a take. A take mainly has three components. It's the anticipation, the reaction, and then the settle. So there is a starting pose, which is the first pose in the take action, and then you go from that into a squash pose, which is the anticipation pose, and there is a popping into the reaction pose, which is generally an overshoot, and then you settle, which is the end pose. For this tutorial, we're going to be using the Mellie Rig, which is a free rig available online. She comes in with closed eyes, which is quite a strange thing to be animating with, like a character with closed eyes. So I'm just going to firstly open her eyes. We're going to be animating the facial expressions, so you want to figure out a convenient way to access these controls. So I'm just going to give it a two-panel layout where one is the face and the other is the controls. Okay, so I'm just going to open her eyes first. I'm going to give it a frame range of 25 frames, which should be more than enough. The starting pose is going to be a lean-in pose where Mary is supposedly looking at something curiously, and what she sees is what shocks her. So the starting pose is leaning in, and then the shocked pose is going to be the more taken aback pose. The take is normally in the head and the expressions. The reason I'm actually showing you some of the body animation as well is to see how that quick movement of a take translates down to different parts of the body. So the quickest movement is going to happen in the facial expression, followed by the movement of the head, and the upper body and then the limbs are progressively delayed reactions, which are slightly offset and slower comparatively. So I'm going to give her a curious expression. So we have Mary leaning in to look at something she can't quite make sense of what she's seeing. So there's just this suspicion, curiosity in her face. When you give eye squint, it's always a good idea to move the cheeks up as well, so the face looks like a connected mass of muscle. It's not like disconnected parts. Okay, so I'm going to save the key at frame 1. Frame 20 is going to be my end pose. So for the end pose, I'm going to move her back and have a more shocked expression on her face. Just going to give it a proper camera angle. The contrasting tilt to the body. And make sure that she's looking at the same spot, so keep the focus of the head. So I find it's easier to just reset the expressions when you're making a big change in expressions instead of trying to, trying to bring it out of the previous expression. It just makes it a lot. It gives it a lot of possibility of messy shapes and transitions. So it's just easier to just reset the slate and just create a whole new expression. I think that's good enough for a shocked expression. So she's going from the curious to the shock to start at the end. So just a transition between the curious and the shock would have been quite a boring animation and quite bland, like it would lack any texture or any sort of impact. It would just be a very slow, boring transition without a take. Okay, so now we have the first and the last pose of the take. 5 is where I'm going to put down the anticipation pose. So 5 is the squash pose, or the anticipation before the popping into reaction pose. So what I'm going to do is, as far as the main body is concerned, that is going to be the most delayed in terms of reaction, and till about frame 5, the main body is not quite reacting to the shock, and it just starts from 5 onwards, whereas the chest will start from frame 3 onwards. The head obviously is going from the first frame itself. So there's just a delay in the reaction. so that the expressions are the first to react, first to move, then the head, then the chest, and then the main body. So these are just the offsetted keys. Now I'm setting the head, the anticipation for the head, so which is the squash, so you bend the head down. I'm going to pop it into the reaction, which will be an overshoot of the reaction at frame 9. And 16 is when it comes into the end pose, which settles at frame 20. So 16 and 20 are almost the same as far as the head is concerned. The head has already come into position, so has the expression, and then the rest of the body is still getting there. So we have the anticipation at frame 5, but what I'm going to do is frame 4, I'm going to manipulate it so that it's favoring frame 5, which basically tightens up the timing of the action. So you go into the anticipation pose at frame 4, like 90%. Frame 5 is the pose, and then we're going to follow the same thing while popping into the reaction. Frame 8 is almost going to be the same as frame 9. So again, it just tightens up the animation, makes it a lot more impactful. So I'm going to just time the expressions. 16, I want the shock expression to already be there because the head kind of settles in place at frame 16 as well. I'm going to overshoot it and then settle it down by frame 20. Let's just see how that looks. It might be a little late because if the head is already overshot and settled by frame 16, then so should the expressions, but let's just try it out. So I've just popped open the eyes at frame 16. At frame 5, at the anticipation pose, I'm going to keep the eyes closed and squeeze down the eyebrows because that's the squash pose. Pull down the eyebrows, close the eyes, tuck the jaw in, and just squash the face without actually squashing the face. So the popping looks a little delayed, the overshoot of the expression. Also, I can't quite see it too clearly, so I'm just going to go into the negative frames right now so that I can see the first expression more clearly, see the curious expression a little more clearly before I go into the take. So I'm going to move the overshooting of the expression, the shock expression, from frame 16 to frame 9, which will coincide with the head now. So this works a lot better. So we go from the anticipation at frame 5 to the reaction, which is actually an overshoot on the reaction at frame 9, and then the settle at frame 16. It's kind of what's happening with the head. I don't like the tilt of the head. I'm just going to fix that a little. And just adjust the tangency. Okay, that works a little better. I'm going to take the shoulders up so that again adds to the whole feel of the squashing pose. Tuck in the elbows a little. I don't want to give too much movement to the elbows because it shouldn't distract from the face during the take. But just to give the illusion of the squash in the body, I'm just going to take the elbows in a little to build the contrast from the opened elbows at the end. And at frame 16, I'm just going to favor frame 20 so that because the shoulders are quite closely connected to the head, they're not going to have a very big drag. So I'm just going to favor them so that by frame 16, they're almost about 80% there. Let me just play around with the shoulders a little. I just want to see what would happen if I overshot them in the opposite direction. Just experimenting. Let's just see. No, it doesn't quite work. I think you're better off just cushioning them. So they're almost at the end position, but they kind of settle in. Yeah, I think that's better. I'm just moving my keys and realizing that they're not locked to frame numbers. Please make sure you always have the frame lock on so that your keys don't fall in between your frame numbers, in between whole frame numbers. Okay, just going to make a play blast. And I think that's our take. Okay, well, thank you so much for watching. I hope this tutorial was helpful. Please do leave your comments in the comment section below, and hope to see you soon with another tutorial. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.